Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey there, hello, how you doing? Just doing battle with technology here. I always lose. It is a Wednesday, a chilly one in May, and the 3rd to be exact, and I'm Lynn Cullen, going to be with you for the next hour, talking about stuff that has happened in the 24 hours when last we talked. On the way in, I was listening to some stupid talk show, and I swear the person who was talking said, at the end of the day, about 5 or 6 times, I'm trying not to exaggerate, 5 or 6 times in a minute. I mean, there was not a sentence that didn't either start that way and even in the course of it go back to, and at the end of the day, blah, 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 at the end of the day. I so hate that phrase. I do not think it exists. I don't remember anyone saying that until about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, whatever. And now people can't talk without saying it. What did we used to say before? At the end of the day. In the end? You know how those little phrases that the talk types, of which I am one, just get stuck on? That one as a listener drives me batty. I actually have some non-Trump stuff today. After yesterday's show, Celine looked like she was suicidal. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "It was the show. Sitting here forced to listen to an hour of me." She looked like she wanted to, at the end of the day, kill herself. So I'm going to try to, Also, I just found out that apparently my computer here has not been sending emails, and I just want to say to a lot of you, I responded to you. That's all I want to say, or thought I had. And Celine just found all of these emails that hadn't gone to you for whatever reason. So I'm embarrassed because I do like to respond, generally speaking. I can't respond to all, and heaven knows if you email me every day, I ain't going to respond every time. But I'm embarrassed. I really had sent very specific acknowledgments and if you were feeling slighted, why didn't Lynn respond to that? The odds are I did. It just, this friggin' computer didn't send them. Okay, I just want to say that because that it just makes me cringe. I mean, I like to be accessible and polite. Okay. Where do we go? I have something up here on the computer. I just want to get this done. It is Trump related, and then we'll move on to something a little easier to digest. I mean, in the course of Trump's day, was it yesterday or the day before? Maybe it was the day before. One of the things he had to do as president, which can seem a little silly, I think, some of this stuff, but he had to welcome the Air Force Academy football team. And that was yesterday, actually. And that was because they had won what is called the Commander-in-Chief's Trophy. And that is, I never heard of it before, but that's given to the military academy, of which there are, 4? West Point, Naval Academy, Air Force Academy, and Coast Guard. probably. It's given to the military academy that has beaten the other military academies in football, the Commander-in-Chief's trophy. So that was the Air Force Academy this year. And so it's the usual picture of all these big football players standing behind the president. And you know how presidents do these things. They make jokes. They do this. They always get a jersey, blah, 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 blah. This was appalling. I mean, because it was Trump again, unable to understand the venue, understand what was required of him, and certainly what was not the proper thing. What he did was talk about himself almost the whole time. And then when he wasn't talking about himself, he was talking about the jerk Democrats. And then he was talking about, you know, all these political things. And as commander-in-chief, you see, a president wears so many hats. It's an impossible job, even for somebody who's competent, which, of course, is not the current holder of the position. But he is commander-in-chief. He is the head of his party. He is the sort of the leader of the entire nation. People who voted for him, people who didn't, people who don't vote. He is both president. He does all the things that in other countries they split up between a prime minister and a president, or a king or queen and a prime minister. He has to do all this ceremonial crap, which is like what this is, and he has to do, you know, the heavy-duty stuff. As I said, it's a ton of hats to wear. But when he's wearing the commander-in-chief hat, he is not to be political. These guys behind him, all of whom, obviously, are going to be under his command in the armed forces, are not there as Republicans or Democrats. They're there as American soldiers, and that has nothing to do with the crap that he was talking about. And in fact, by doing what he did, he put them in a very awkward position, an uncomfortable position, because, hell, they probably knew he shouldn't be saying what he was saying. And he's their commander-in-chief. Can you imagine what might be going through the heads of some of these guys? My God, this is the guy who can send us to our deaths? My God, this is a guy who doesn't even know how to handle a ceremonial shtick like this? Okay, here's some of the lines that I guess freaked one of the reporters out that was there. Here he was on point, sort of. He says, "We all join the very proud and distinguished heritage of the long blue line. You know what that is, fellows. That's a long, big, beautiful blue line. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but the blue line, I thought, was the Coast Guard. I mean, I think he had the wrong... Is the Air Force a long blue line? The only thing I can think of blue with the Air Force is... Ta-da! Into the wild blue yonder, right? I don't know. And then there was a member of Congress there from Arizona who was a fighter pilot. And he kept wandering back to talking to her. Hey, my friend, Martha McSally here, who, by the way, I think can fly a plane better than anybody up here. She's the real deal. She's tough. She likes a certain plane, which I'm going to mention in a minute. She specifically likes a certain aircraft. Am I right? None of this has anything whatsoever to do with the purpose of this. Then he goes on. There will never be a time, I will tell you this, when we will be spending more money. We are doing the necessary money. We are going to have the finest equipment of all times. We have more money now for the border than we've had in 10 years. The Democrats don't tell you that. They forgot in their notes. They forgot to tell you that. And then listen to this incomprehensible thing. Do you know what a donor is, fellas? You'll learn when you get a little older. You'll learn about donors. I used to be a donor. I used to get everything I wanted. Somebody help me. What the fuck does that mean? It is nonsensical. That's why some people, I guess like Joe Scarborough, who knew him before, are saying, I think he's got dementia. I mean, it's non sequitur after non sequitur. Do you know what a donor is, fellas? Oh, yeah, you'll learn about donors. I used to be a donor. I used to get everything I wanted. Okay. This was the Air Force football team, guys, that he is talking to. Okay. I love the Air Force. I love those planes. I love buying those planes. Then he talks about one plane. It does some pretty big damage. I know that. And we're working on that. She loves that plane. Back to the Congresswoman, I guess. So the F-16 Viper, not as good? He's looking at her. Not as good? To the B-2, little different, but still no. Pretty good, though. I mean, what the F is he talking about? It's little scraps of information that he's gotten here and there when he happened to be paying attention. All right, I'll stop that. It's unbelievable. Oops, I just lost my mail. Okay. Chuck writes, instead of at the end of the day, here's some things you could say. When it's all said and done, that's another one. But that could get wearisome too. In the long run, in the end. That's the one that occurs to me. I say, so in the end, blah. Which is a lot quicker. After all, ultimately, there, down to one word. I like that. One day. Good for you, Chuck. Thanks. At the end of the day. I have a dear friend who, one of her verbal tics is she says, and to make a long story short, and I finally said something to her. I like, yeah, and to make a long, and I feel so bad. Because she is now hearing herself say it. Which is the first step on the road to recovery, I must say. But she's hearing herself, and she's getting freaked out. And so I think she'll end up not saying it at all. But what is it I say that drives you guys crazy? What do I say repetitively? I mean, I know some days I get words stuck in my head and they surface constantly. But then they're gone maybe the next day. I don't know. I'm sure I have many a verbal tic. I'm aware of a few, I think, but I don't know. I don't know. I also got my sister to stop saying spectacular. That word now never comes out of her mouth. It used to come out of her mouth constantly, which drove me crazy. Oh, we had a spectacular dinner. It was spectacular this and a spectacular that. It was spectacular, a spectacular. So I just sort of started to note it. And now, of course, it makes somebody self-conscious. They completely, after a while, they learn to jettison whatever word it is. But that just shows I'm a jerk. So, here's some stuff that is not. Beth says, I have a friend who says to make a long story even more boring. Oh, that's good. That's good. And also, so the long way around the barn. Well, I had an uncle who said, to make a long story short, and he that would come after he had been droning on for hours. And once he said that, you knew you were in for another, an hour or two. So if he said to make a long story short, the first chance you got to make a retreat was a good idea. So I think I have a little thing in my head when somebody says to make a long story short, I think, uh-oh. Okay, I want to talk now about something totally different. I want to talk about things getting bigger. I mean, we're getting bigger in the wrong ways. A lot of the world is getting bigger in a different way. They're getting taller. Americans are not getting taller. We're shrinking. We're losing our place in the vertical category. And as you know, we're expanding. Moi very much included. But you know what my favorite apple is? Honeycrisp. You know, I don't like buying them anymore because they're the size of watermelons. You could feed a family of 4 on one friggin' apple. And that's weird. And it's not normal. And so you start looking at that big, here's your apple. It's this big friggin' Honeycrisp. And you think, what did they do to this thing? What kind of, Franken produce is this that it's this big? If I want an apple, I want an apple that you hold in your hand. And now I see Giant Eagle actually has a special section where it has, I'm not sure if they call them small apples, but they're regular apples. It's the real deal. So somebody I'm sure they got a lot of complaints. Who can eat one of those apples? But it's not just apples. It's all kinds of stuff. Like we always think bigger is better. And one of the other things that is frightening in how it has grown is a chicken. When you go and buy a chicken, a roasting chicken, again, they're like 8 pounds or something. Here, I came across. Where is it? Okay, a conventional chicken. Broiler chicken is what they call them. Have been bred to produce the most amount of meat in as short a time as possible, reducing the farmer's costs and increasing the farmer's profits. So get this. Let's go back to before all this kind of bigger is better crap and people just did natural. Let's go back to the 1935. The average broiler chicken went to the slaughter weighing 2.8 pounds. So when who is it? Is it Calvin Coolidge who said a chicken in every pot? He's talking about less than a 3-pound bird that was going to feed the family. Right? You know what it is now. Oh, and by the way, it took 98 days for that chicken to reach that weight. So it was poking around in the chicken yard for over 3 months and then getting slaughtered before it was even 3 pounds. And that was what a chicken looked like. You could, that was a chicken. Now, the average chicken is over 6 pounds. So twice as large. It's over 6 pounds when it is slaughtered. And it has reached 6 pounds, being alive only 47 days. So about a month and a half to. So, yeah, we're making them bigger in a shorter period of time. And now a chicken. And if you look at old recipes, I mean, it is bizarre, really. They're talking about a bird that is half the size of the birds we're talking about. And there's starting to become a backlash. I'm glad to hear. Americans are starting to say things like, I don't want these weird birds. Do you know the birds we eat? If you buy a regular chicken, the birds we eat are so unchicken-like. I mean, these are Franken chickens. They are bred to be eating machines, and they in fact eat at such a rate that they get so big that in such a quick time that as they approach the time when they're going to be slaughtered, they can't even stand up. You can tell the chickens that are going to be slaughtered because they're all lying down. They have shorter legs. They have larger feet so they can support themselves at all. And they can't move. They just sit there nesting because they're ridiculously fat. They're not what a chicken was supposed to be. So some farms, like Purdue chickens, they are now doing research into having a more ordinary kind of regular chicken, letting the chicken live longer, feed slower in a more normal fashion. And of course, these chickens would be more pricey because the farmer's got to keep them longer and all this stuff. That's where we come in. These Franken chickens came about because we demand cheap food, right? And bigger breasts and big fat wings, because we're into wings now. And that's not a normal chicken. In order to do a chicken like that, you start messing with its genetics and you get the weird things that we call chicken now, which, by the way, do not taste as good as a regular chicken. Back in the day, that's another phrase. Back in the day, chicken farmers, especially those in Europe, they would, if you went to buy a chicken, you asked for a specific type of chicken because they taste different. This kind of a chicken tastes a little different than that kind of a chicken. So our chickens now have all this meat, but you better put something on it, like a sauce of some sort, because there's no flavor at all, which is not true of a real chicken. So, says here, if we want to go back to what a real chicken is, we'd have to accept some trade-offs. The new chickens, which will be able to live a whole 3 months before they're slaughtered, will have better flavor, but their meat is distributed in a different way over their body. In other words, they don't have these huge boobs. They have much bigger thighs. That's a natural thing. And their wings amount to next to nothing. So you're not going to get a big meaty wing. And I don't know. What's driving this return back to normal chickens are places like Whole Foods and Panera Bread that are demanding meat from what are now called slow growth chickens. Slow growth chickens being a chicken. They think that a healthier, happier, longer-lived chicken is going to taste better. And research generally shows they are right. So, one of the farmers involved in this stuff says, Oh, we just have to figure out how we can make this happen so we're not ending up with a chicken nobody can afford. Because it turns out these more normal chickens will be pricier. Tastier, pricier. And I think the odds are that, well, it depends. I guess rich people will eat them. Weird, though. Oh, Kathleen. She says, "Dear Lynn, you look so fucking distressed." Do I? Not particularly, Celine.
I look at you a lot.
Yeah, but I'm not distressed today. Maybe that's just my resting face. My heart goes out to you. Jeez! Excuse me, Kathleen. Thank you. But I'm really not that distressed. I'm always stressed, but I wouldn't say I'm de-stressed. Or is that distressed? It's distressed. Yeah. I'm always stressed, but I'm not stressed. Kathleen's you're projecting today, Kathleen, because she says, my friends and I are all experiencing the same thing about this president. It gets weirder and worse every day. But are we the only people experiencing this? Doesn't Congress see it? They are the only ones who can intervene on the country's behalf. They're Republicans. I simply can't see why they aren't acting to remove this dangerous nutcase. They're Republicans. I can't offer you any comfort, but please know that you are not alone. Oh, it's very sweet. Thank you. So I want to make a long story short. Still back on animals. This is about dogs. This is so cool. Yeah, I can't know. This is my avoidance of distressing subjects like the commander-in-chief. So there's a book out called How to Tame a Fox and Build a Dog. This is written in part by a woman who has literally spent her life turning foxes into dogs. And I remember reading about this a long time ago, because it's been going on since the 1930s. So this is it's like an 80-year experiment that was begun and still is in the Soviet, it was then the Soviet Union. It's now Russia. And a guy named Dmitry Belyaev was the guy who started this. He then brought in this woman, Ludmila Trut. And this was in a time when one of the big exports from Russia, the Soviet Union at the time, were fox pelts. There were fox farms all over the place. They were raised and bred and slaughtered for their coats. But this Belyaev wasn't interested in fur. He was a scientist who was more concerned about evolution. And how did the dog, he wondered, become domesticated? What was the process? How long would that have taken? And he began asking the fox farms to pull out their most unaggressive, their least aggressive foxes, and let him have them. And in 1952, this is when he really began this program, where he started taking foxes that didn't bite your hand off as you came toward them, or didn't run for cover or didn't whatever. But foxes, by their nature, don't want to be anywhere near a human being. And if a human being does approach, they will fight, to attack. So he got the ones least likely to act that aggressively, and he began breeding them. He would breed them, and then the next generation he would take the least aggressive, breed. He wanted to see if he could mimic and actually accelerate the process by which some wolves, very close to foxes, some wolves would have naturally evolved over tens of thousands of years into that lovable dog we love. How the heck did that exactly happen? And he suspected that natural behavioral variation among the wild wolves was key to their becoming domesticated. Some wolves were skittish by nature, some less so. And he figures it was the less skittish that eventually, obviously, began to, who knows what, approach or be approachable. A domesticated mammal, all domesticated mammals, differ from their feral, their wild brethren, in that domesticated mammals, I guess I didn't know this, domesticated mammals breed more throughout the year than if you're living in the wild. Your breeding is a direct result, the time of your breeding, a direct result of the season, the weather. So the wild animal is really stuck in the seasons, breeding generally just once a year. The foxes he was able to breed much more quickly, thus speeding up the 10,000 years that it took the wolf to become a domesticated dog. So he starts with these farmed foxes that are seriously ill-tempered, apparently, that lurch and snap, and anyone handling them had to wear these thick padded gloves. But it's these ones that were slightly less excitable. And after a few generations of taking them and breeding them and taking them again, the less excitable ones, and breeding them, there started to become differences, subtle but noticeable. And I don't know, the woman who wrote the book joined him 7 years into this experiment. She's still there. She's still breeding these guys. In the fourth generation, one of the pups, and they gave him a name, Ember. When Trot, the woman, approached his cage, Ember did something that no fox had ever done. He wagged his tail. They'd never seen it before. None of his siblings wagged their tails. Tail wagging is something foxes are not known to do. Ember's descendants wagged their tails. So, why Ember all of a sudden wagged his is still like how did that happen? But then his progeny all wagged theirs. And generation after generation became more affectionate, when humans approached. They would press themselves against the cages instead of snarling and going to the back. When she came over, they roll on their backs and want their tummies rubbed. Instead of biting her hand, they licked it. By the 1970s, some of these foxes were living with her in her house. They were sleeping with her in bed. And here's the next weird thing that happened. The more domesticated foxes began having physical changes. They started developing things like spots on their heads, where they used to be just silver, like a silver fox. All of a sudden, there was this white spot, and maybe a white spot over one eye. By the 10th generation, one of the pups was born with floppy ears. Now, what happens is little pups can have sort of a floppy ear, but it straightens up. Some pups started having floppy ears that never straightened up. Chemically, the more domesticated foxes in just 10 generations had dramatically lower stress levels, stress hormones, and the females were ready to mate anytime, out of season. Even the structure of certain glands, even their skeletons began to get subtle differences. So what these Russians pulled off was literally witnessing evolution at warp speed, which is exactly what the guy who started this had wanted. He never lived to really see it completely carried out. When the Soviet Union collapsed under Ronald Reagan, research funds to keep this going disappeared. The Soviet Union was in disarray. In the 1990s, many of these foxes that had been part of this long experiment starved to death. She euthanized a lot of them that she loved, and she made an eloquent appeal to scientists around the world to save the experiment. And they did. And so it continues, albeit with that frightening thing that happened in the 90s. But there you have it. Isn't that fascinating? I guess if you want to know more, the name of the book is How to Tame a Fox and Build a Dog. And it's a short book. It's 216 pages. And it's she has written it with the help of a writer. But maybe some of you would find that of interest, as I do. And it's not about Donald Trump, which I find particularly wonderful. Okay, what we got here, guys? Hang on. I want to see your... Why can't I... Okay. Never mind. And then here's this other weird story. I did not know this. It has to do with Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks' house. The house she lived in from the 50s up until her death in Detroit. And you say, wait a minute, why was she in Detroit? Didn't her whole thing happen in Alabama? Her moment on the bus? Well, yeah, it did. Which is why she had to run out of Alabama, because she was threatened. She had death threats. So she left, went up to Detroit, where she did have some family. And she lived in her brother's home, I think. But a year or two ago, it was going to be torn down. And someone saved it. But it wasn't an American. Well, it was an American. But here's how the house got saved. And this is weird because, you know, what do we do with famous people's houses? We make them into museums. We do. Even places they lived in for a little bit. Here, you know, in that place, in that house, that's where, and you can name it. But Rosa Parks is such a person where that house is, you know, iconic, but not enough for, I guess, a few years ago in Detroit, in the United States of America, nobody lifted a finger. It was going to be ripped, torn down. An artist who is American but was born in Germany and also now lives in Germany, he hears about this. His name is Ryan Mendoza. And he bought the house and took it apart. It's made of, you know, just like clapboard. He took it apart, board by board, and he shipped it to Berlin, where he works. And then he spent almost a year rebuilding, putting it back, board by board, exactly as it had been. Mostly by himself, mostly by hand. And as he said, it was an act of love. He put it in his backyard. So I'm looking at a picture of Rosa Parks' house, and it's incongruously sitting next to a 1960s era apartment building in this guy's backyard. And there's something moving about Germans embracing this humble house, Rosa Parks' house, while we did not. The Germans saved it for a second life. And it is visited constantly. It is not, he doesn't let anyone inside because he hasn't been able to do anything with the inside, but he's rigged up speakers so that her voice comes out of the house. People come to see it. And one of the reporters for a Berlin newspaper who wrote about this said he felt that for many in Germany, that there is now, since World War II, a strong impulse to approach painful aspects of the past. Rosa Parks being a painful part of the past because she reminds us of the racism endemic in our country. And an American history scholar in Dublin said, generally in the United States with public heroes, there is an attempt to preserve anywhere they lived. The neglect of Rosa Parks' house, I think, speaks to a contemporary American unwillingness to deal with racism. Maybe. I don't know. But now it's in Germany, and the German reporter said the United States has long been a model for democracy. But now the political discourse in the United States is not reflecting democratic values. I'm glad the House made its way here. It's a dilapidated thing. That's the guy who saved it and rebuilt it, and his wife. Shame on us. Also, in regard to the Germans, sort of taking over what was our role as Americans. Angela Merkel went to Moscow yesterday and spoke with Vladimir Putin face to face. And unlike Donald Trump, she didn't come away singing his praises. She spoke to Putin and told him to stop terrorizing homosexuals. She told him that free expression should be the right of every Russian citizen. Angela Merkel said to the frightening, nasty Putin to stop messing with the Jehovah's Witnesses. She spoke truth to power. She upheld democratic values. And again, we, under Donald Trump, and with our move to the right, have ceded that responsibility that we used to have. If you were to ask me what was American exceptionalism, excuse me, I would say it was that. It was our First Amendment. It was our founding documents. It was our being a beacon to people in autocratic, intolerant countries. Never mind our own intolerance. We seemed to try often to push ourselves forward. That's not so true anymore, because we have elected people who now control the three branches of our government, who don't see that as what's exceptional. They see raw power as what's exceptional. Wealth and power, not values. Here's some good news. Black Americans, while they still have a higher death rate overall than white folks in America, the gap is closing steadily. This is according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And if you're a black American and you've made it to 65, you're going to outlive most white Americans who've made it to 65. Because what kills black Americans are chronic illnesses like heart disease and stroke and diabetes. And if you make it through that thicket and you're a relatively healthy 65-year-old, you're going to live a long, long time. I mean, obviously this is not an individual thing, but the narrowing gap in death rates actually started about 20 years ago. Who knew? About 20 years ago, and it's just continuing, shows no signs of abating. Both black and white Americans are living longer, but the death rate among blacks has been dropping faster than that among whites. You know that fake news, that ad, that fake ad, that the Trump re-election campaign, if you can imagine, has been running, which says things like, this is the most successful 100 first days of any presidency. The only reason you don't know it is the mainstream media is a bunch of fake news. Blah, 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 blah. CNN's refused to air it. They said, we will air it if you get rid of the lies in it, because we don't want, in the piece, they show, when they say fake news and it comes up on the screen, fake news, they show Wolf Blitzer. And why would CNN run something that's saying that Wolf Blitzer is lying to you? When, in fact, that's not true. So CNN said the mainstream media is not fake news, and therefore the ad is false. Per our policy, it will be accepted, the ad that is, only if the graphic that says fake news is deleted. I mean, the whole thing is a bunch of crap. It's not just the fake news thing. I mean, the first line of it is, America has rarely seen such success. Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. Okay. I think I'm about run out of... I bet you're all watching the Comey testimony. Is he testifying right now? Yeah, that's what's happening. Sure. I understand. Unless you think that gays are, now totally, they're fine, no problem there. Let us recall that Pennsylvania, as the state, you can still fire a gay person for being gay. You can. You can fire a gay person for being gay. You don't have to even rent to a person for being... Now, you can't do that here in Pittsburgh. There are some cities that have laws, but the state, Anyway, there's a story that is just heartbreaking about a couple, Robert Husky and Jack Zawadsky, who had been together for over 50 years. And when they could, they got married a few years back. But they'd been together for 52 years, and they'd lived their lives generally in Wisconsin on a farm growing apples. Then they became special education teachers. And then they moved to Mississippi because they wanted someplace warmer, which often happens to people in Wisconsin. They wanted some place warmer. Well, now one of them, Jack Zawadsky, has filed a lawsuit in federal court because the love of his life, Robert Husky, died at the age of 86 after a long illness. He was in a nursing home at that point. And his husband, Mr. Zawadsky, had, knowing the end was near, had approached a funeral home, had prearranged for them to pick up and cremate the body. And then all of a sudden, at the last moment, someone in the home, the funeral home, I think someone named Henrietta Brewer, in fact, said, no, we cannot pick that body up. We do not, here's the quote, deal with their kind. This created a great deal of distress, obviously, at a time when Mr. Zawadsky was plenty distressed, as it was, having lost the love of his life. And this guy's not an activist, never has been. He and his husband lived unassuming lives, quietly. And then at the end, this indignity. We don't deal with their kind. And the way this happened is because the nursing home had said to the funeral parlor that the deceased spouse was a male. And that's when the owners of the home said, we ain't dealing with their kind. So they had to scramble to find another funeral home that had a crematorium. They found one 90 minutes away, but they refused to hold Husky. It was one horror after another. And this old guy, never an activist, said he was suing not because he wants any money, because who cares, but he wants to ensure that no one else goes through what he experienced and that no one would have to see such disrespect shown to their husband. Zawadsky said, I hope this will bring him some honor. But the law in Mississippi is like the law here in Pennsylvania. And technically, I mean, it's not like the funeral home's not going to have a little bit of a case. This is why it was done in federal court as a civil rights violation. Because, like Pennsylvania, there is really no protection for gays in regard to discrimination. Neither Mississippi law, and for that matter, federal law, explicitly forbids discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. Even the federal law does not. Oh. It's incredible. Oh, I don't want that. I want newest. Thank you. Jeff says, although I haven't been able to call, I've been listening every day. It's great to be able to put you on pause. I think that is a sentiment that would be well received by my son, by my family, and by many other people in the community. It's great being able to put you on pause when I have to get out of the car. Anyway, you always have a really well balanced. Balanced? I don't even pretend to be balanced with stories beyond Trump. The fox to dogs story was fascinating, although somewhat disconcerting. I wonder how humans are evolving or devolving. I wonder what all the screen gazing is doing to us over the long run. Nothing good. Yeah, you know if you've listened to me for a long time, you know my thoughts on this. We're going to sort of cyborgize ourselves. We're going to willingly do it. We're going to have little things implanted so you don't have to hold the damn phone anymore. It'll just appear like in front of your face. Or be shot straight into your brain, whatever it is you're looking for. I don't know. No. Humans are going to be a flash in the pan on the evolutionary scale. They're going to be a flash in the pan. Okay, I think the rest are things that I can't. Okay. Oh, I didn't know it was that time. That's why you've been
Looking at you.
You've been giving me looks, Celine. I went over. I'm sorry. Okay.
You weren't paying attention to my face.
Okay. Well, I guess that does it. And then some. To make a long story short, and at the end of the day, I got to get the hell out of here. You have a good one. Go Pens, for God's sakes. And bye. See you tomorrow.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.